How's it going, guys? So in this video I'll be showing you how to replace the top screen in a new 3DS non-XL. So as you can see, it's quite obvious this screen is shattered and needs to be replaced. So this guide will show you from start to finish how to take apart the entire new 3DS, how to get that screen out of the hinge, replace it with a new one, and how to put everything back together. So these are the tools you're going to need. You're going to need a screwdriver with a Phillips bit and also a tri-wing screwdriver. I like to have two sets of tweezers, one with a bit pointier end and the other one with not as sharp edges, but you can also just get away with having one finer pair of tweezers. And also I like to use a razor blade to separate the adhesive on the screen, but that's not necessary. You can also use your fingernail. So the first step is to obviously power off your 3DS, and then take out both of these screws in the back. I've already done that, and remove the back plate. And after that, just remove the battery and an SD card if you have one inserted. When you've done that, just remove these three tri-wing screws from here and remove this SD card reader. You just lift up from the bottom and it slides out, and then underneath right here you can see that that connection in there, and I'll just take my tweezers. You can also use your fingernail and just pry up on that and it should just pop out. It's a press style connector, so you can also just pull up and it should come out pretty easily. Next, you'll need to switch to your Phillips screwdriver bit and use your fingernail or your pair of tweezers to lift up these rubber feet. Underneath, you'll find two screws and also these 5 screws here. Take out all of these. These 7 screws are all the same size. Now we have all the bottom housing screws taken out, so you can carefully lift up the back just a tiny bit, like that, and then you can pry up on the bottom part with your fingernail, or you can also use something like a guitar pick, and just get the case lifted over the headphone jack, just like that, and then lift up carefully. And underneath, there is one ribbon cable right here. Again, it's one of those push down ribbon cables, so you can just pull up on it and it'll come out. And then you can flip up the housing completely like a book, and underneath you'll find 2 more connections. Just lift up on them from the bottom with your fingernail or a pair of tweezers and they should go off really easily. Now we need to remove the motherboard and the power board. To do that, remove these 4 screws right here. They should be one size, and then also remove these 1, 2, they should be a bit longer. There are a couple types of connections on this motherboard. So there are these latch style connectors right here on the camera ribbon cable, the bottom display, the touch screen, and also the circle pad and the power board. They're relatively easy to open. Just use your fingernail, for example, and get underneath the latch and just lift it up carefully, and it just lifts up. It folds up just like that. There. And then you can just take your tweezers and pull it out without really any force required. And the second type of cable is found right here, and also here, and down here there are also 2. These don't have a latch, you just pull on them, you don't have to lift up anything, so just take your tweezers, and they require a bit more force, but it still should slide out relatively easy. So you just have these 4 connections. Just pull them out carefully, and right here. There. And next, we can remove this power cable right here. You can just get your tweezers underneath and pull up. Just straight up. It doesn't pull out or anything, just pull it upwards. And same applies to this antenna cable right here. Just get your tweezers underneath and carefully pull up. As well as this connection, it's again one of those push down connectors, so just get your tweezers underneath and pull it up. Now that we've disconnected the first couple of cables and removed these screws, the power board should be loose. And there's a bit of adhesive down there, so just get your tweezers underneath or pull it up with your fingers and then fold it over, because underneath there's another connection. Again, it's a latch style, so just lift it up and pull out. And now your power board should be free. Now to finish removing this motherboard, we need to remove the circle pad. So remove these two screws and keep them separate because they are much longer than the back housing screws. And now just pull up on the circle pad and lift it over because it is still connected. And again, just take your tweezers, and this is another latch style connector, so just get your tweezers underneath like that and pull up on the latch like that, and then the circle pad should come out without any force. Now to completely remove the motherboard, we need to disconnect these last ribbon cables right here. Again, latch style connectors, just lift up on the connection and take your tweezers and pull the cable out. And as well as this touch connector right here, lift it up carefully, pull it out, as well as with this last connection. Now we have everything disconnected from the top side of the motherboard, but there is still two connections underneath. So carefully lift it up, make sure none of the ribbon cables get caught on the motherboard, and fold it over like this. And then there's two more latch style connections down here. Just lift the connectors up and the cables should pull out really easily. Just like that, and your motherboard is removed. Now we need to start working on the top half of the 3DS. So flip your 3DS over and remove this top piece of plastic. I'll show you on another 3DS that's broken because this 3DS doesn't have one anymore, it's lost. You just look for these cutouts right here and on the other side right here, and you just lift up and the housing should pop off. And now just remove these 4 screws and keep these on a separate pile. They're a different size. Now fold open your 3DS and remove these 2 rubber covers with your fingernail or with tweezers. And you'll find 2 screws underneath, just remove those. They're the exact same size as the screws that came out here, so just put those on the same pile. Now you'll be able to remove the top housing, so just lift up carefully and it should come out really easy. Now to remove the hinge right here, fold your 3DS open into this position. So the not quite fully open position, but the position in which you would play your 3DS normally. And then take your pair of pointy tweezers or a really small screwdriver, and right in here you'll be able to see that white part. That's the hinge, and we need to push that hinge inwards. So get your tweezers and you can kind of push it in there, and as you can see the hinge should come out right here. I'll show you again from this view. So right here I get my tweezers in there and push on it, and as you can see the hinge has popped out a bit. Now you can just fold your 3DS back and it should move without clicking at all, so it should be super loose now. Now we need to separate the top half from the bottom half, so just remove this antenna cable all the way, and then remove this side of the hinge without any cables. So just kind of bend it open a tiny bit and it should come out. And now we need to get all the cables out from here. So just fold them straight, and there is this tiny channel right here, and we need to thread those cables through there while we push this housing outwards. Make sure this metal ring comes out of the hinge and stays in the top screen half. It shouldn't stay inside the bottom half, or else you won't be able to get those cables out. So now, take all your cables and thread them through that small channel. Just like that. It shouldn't take any force whatsoever, so if it gets caught anywhere, be super careful. These cables can rip really easily, and that will break more parts on your 3DS. So now that we've got those in there in that channel, just pull up on them, and you should be able to separate those halves relatively easily. The antenna cable also just threads through, just like that, and you'll have the top half and the bottom half separated now. Now we need to remove these two screws right here and here, just put them on a separate pile. As you can see right here, this is the screen ribbon cable, and all the other ribbon cables are on top of it. So we need to fold down all these cables, so the speakers and the camera, to get to that bottom ribbon cable. So just lay your screen down flat and take that camera and fold it over. Now we need to remove the speaker ribbon cable, but before we do that, we need to lift over this side because there are some connections underneath. So just get that speaker kind of removed out of its place and fold this over, and you can see two connections under there. They're also just those latch style connectors, so just lift up on the latch and the cables should pull out nicely. Like that. And underneath both these boards, there are these sliders, so I like to take those out and set them aside because they get lost relatively easily, as well as these pieces of fabric underneath the speakers. So this piece of rubber, as well as the fabric underneath. So I just like to set that aside so it doesn't get lost. Now we can fold over this speaker ribbon cable, and we're almost to the screen. We can start removing the screen. So take your fingers from behind and kind of push up on the screen because it's adhered on there relatively strong. You don't need to be too careful with the screen as it's already broken and you're going to be replacing it. But you really have to be careful with this housing because it's made of plastic and you really don't want to damage it. Okay, now my screen's loose, but I don't want to pull it out just yet. So you just fold it over carefully, and we need to remove this antenna cable because it's in our way. So just take that cable and kind of straighten it out a bit, and carefully pull it through. Now we can actually remove the screen. So just lift up the camera and speaker ribbon cable because we don't need to touch those. They can stay right in place. All we have to do is remove this display ribbon cable. To do that, just kind of roll it up, and if you rip this ribbon cable, you're replacing the screen anyways, so it's not a big deal, but really try to keep it intact because this is your practice round for when you have to thread the new ribbon cable back through. Here you can see that display ribbon cable all rolled up, and you should be able to just pull it through with no force required. So it should just slide through super easily, like that. And now your screen should be loose, so just make sure those magnets from the speakers don't stick onto the screen, but your screen should be loose now. Here I have my broken screen, and I'm going to use a used screen out of a broken 3DS. The screen is known to be working, so I'm just going to use that one, but you'll probably get a screen without any adhesive or screen lens in place. I'll show you how that looks. So your screen will most likely look something like this. This is an XL screen, so it doesn't really look the same, but you'll have this screen protector on top, and you won't have any adhesive around here. So what you'll have to do is remove the screen lens and transfer your black adhesive from your old screen onto your new screen. I already have adhesive on here, so I'm just going to swap these screen lenses, but I do need that black frame on the white screen. So I'm just going to swap those over right now and show you how I do that. So I just take my razor blade and get underneath the screen, careful not to scratch it, and just pull up on it, and it should come off just like that. And I'll set that aside, and I'll do the exact same with my other screen. Just get my razor blade underneath, pull up on the screen, and now I can get my fingernail underneath there. Just like that. And make sure to not get any fingerprints underneath the screen. And now I can just put that on my new screen. What I was saying with that adhesive is this black border around here. You just get your razor blade underneath, and then you can start pulling up on that adhesive with, I like to use my fingers, but you can also try using tweezers or something like that. And just pull up on that adhesive and install that on your new screen. Now before you press down on your screen protector, I like to use some compressed air and just get underneath, and as you can see there's a dust speck right there. It's kind of hard to see maybe, but I just grab my compressed air and clean all of that up and install this screen lens. And to check if your fitment is right, because you can have that lens in the wrong place, just take your housing and thread the antenna cable through the hinge so it's out of the way. And then you can just take your screen and lay it in place. And look on the other side if that lens is aligned properly. If it isn't, just take it off and realign it to make sure that fitment is proper. But mine looks good, so I'm just going to remove that screen again, and also remove the antenna cable out of the hinge again, so we can start threading that cable through the hinge again. So just again, just like before, roll up this ribbon cable relatively tightly, but not so tight that you'll damage the screen. So just get it looking kind of like this, and it should be thin enough to just thread through right here. And then you can take your tweezers and grab that ribbon cable and pull it through. And again, it should come out without any force required. So if you start pulling on that ribbon cable, really make sure that everything's aligned properly, that it's rolled tightly, because you don't want to apply any pressure on this screen. It should go through there really easily, or you might risk damaging your new screen, which would really suck because then you'd have to order a new one. You can't replace these cables. So just get that through all the way, and then you can unroll your ribbon cable so it matches the original cables, just like this, and that's it. So once you've done that, just make sure your antenna cable is running through this channel here properly. Just push it down with your fingernail or tweezers, and then we need to connect these small cables onto the speaker ribbon cable. So just grab those. So you just take those cables and push them in all the way, and then fold over the latch. Now that you've got everything connected back up, you can take your screen and fold it over. Make sure everything's aligned properly, and it should kind of drop right in place. Like that. And also take your camera ribbon cable and fold it over as well. Just put everything back in place as it was before, but the placement doesn't have to be perfect. We're going to do that later when we put everything back together, but for now you can just leave it. Now grab your bottom half of the 3DS and thread the antenna cable through the hinge until you've got it about this far. And now you'll have to take all your cables and thread them through that channel right there. So just get the cables in there, and again, without any pressure, they should just go through smoothly, and also all the cables should just slide into the hinge. If you have any difficulties, you can kind of pull on these cables lightly to make them go through a bit more easily. I'll just show you that one more time. You want to be really careful with that. Just take all these cables, pull on them a tiny bit, and they should just slide in. So give that a bit of a wiggle and it should go through. Now we need to attach the hinge again. So just kind of bend the housing up and get that slid in. And now you want to get the 3DS back into that playing position that we had before. So just like this. Almost folded up, but not folded up all the way. And we'll get our fine tweezers and push this hinge piece back into there. So you might need to, for me it slid in super easily, but if it doesn't, you might need to wiggle on the screen a tiny bit, wiggle it back and forth to make sure that slides in all the way. Once you've gotten that hinge piece put in all the way, your screen should snap in place like before. So just like that, it should snap in place. And you can kind of fold it back all the way, and now we can start reassembling all the parts here. Now we can take all our fabric pieces and the foam as well as the sliders and put them back in place. When you do that, just take the black slider and put it on this side. I like to put it in the most farthest down position possible, and then take this this slider right here, and as you can see, this is the part that actually slides. So just put that down all the way, and it should just go in place perfectly. So that plastic piece right here should align with this notch. So when you push that down, just make sure your slider goes up all the way and down all the way freely, and also moves that potentiometer in there, or your volume and 3D controls won't work anymore. So make sure that's seated perfectly. If it isn't, just lift it back up, make sure everything's aligned, get that all the way down, put it back in place, and once you're satisfied, take your small screw again. I'll just show you real quick. It's this size. Take that small screw and screw that down, and do the exact same for the 3D slider. So just slide it down all the way. Make sure this gray part is also all the way down, and it should go in place fine. Make sure it slides. Mine does. So I'll take my screw and screw that piece down. Now we need to get that speaker fabric and foam underneath the speaker. So I like to just lift up on the speakers by the cable and set them aside, and then just take your fabric, lay it in place, and get your foam, put it on top, and replace the speaker. Do that as well for the other side. Lift up, take that fabric, put it in place, and get that foam on top. Place the speaker, and you're done with the top half. So just take your top half, put it in place. It should snap down all the way, and now we can screw back all these 4 screws. So these are the medium-sized screws. Just take all 4 and screw them in. At this point, you're done with the hardest part of the repair. So you've gotten all the cables threaded through, your new screen back in place, everything should snap as it was before. If that's working perfect, you're done with the first half. Take a quick break, grab a drink, and celebrate your success. Now that you've had a quick break, we need to take these boards and put them back in place. So I like to start again with the motherboard, and to do that, first we need to take the antenna cable and put it back in this original channel. So make sure your antenna cable is going underneath these 3 cables and then push it in place. You can kind of see the markings on the antenna cable to get it aligned as it was before. You just want a tiny bit of slack right here. If you don't see anything, just have that tiny bit of slack right there and you should be fine. So just again push it in this channel and also get it around this screw post and through here. Now we can grab our motherboard and flip it over, because first we need to connect these 2 cables. So the first connection is going to be the middle cable. So what I like to do is just separate these cables and make sure the middle one is loose, and I just lay the motherboard on top, just like that, and make sure this first latch is opened. Now I can take my tweezers and grab the middle ribbon cable, and it should slide into that place relatively easy. It might take some trial and error, but it should slide in all the way, kind of like that, and then you can fold down the latch. I'll show you that real quick, and it should look like this. The metal contact should be in all the way, and now we can take that bottommost ribbon cable and make sure this black latch is folded open, and take your cable and pull it up like this. Now we need to fold it over 45 degrees so the brown part of the ribbon cable is facing up. If you do it the other way around, so if you try to put your cable in like this with the contacts up, your 3DS won't work. So make sure it's folded over this way. Now just take your cable. It's kind of hard to do this mid-air. Now I can take that latch and just fold it over. So your ribbon cables should look like this afterwards, with that brown part facing up again and with the other cable connected. Now carefully take your motherboard and fold it over, and you can't just push it down like this. You need to make sure that all these cables are over top, as well as make sure that this cable is also over top and these bottom cables, as well as the cable right here. Just make sure nothing gets caught on it, and then you can kind of put the motherboard in place through these screw holes right there. Now we can take that last ribbon cable right here and again grab it with our tweezers and push it in just like that and fold over the latch. And I'll just start putting back all these connections. So I'll grab this ribbon cable and push it in all the way, just a tiny bit more. And there we go, just like that, and fold over the latch, like that. Now we can take this ribbon cable and just push it in. Again, on these connections there is no latch, so you can just push it in without pulling up on anything. The touchscreen does have a latch, so just grab your tweezers or your fingernail and lift up on that connection and grab your ribbon cable and push it in all the way, like that. And these are the last 3 cables, So these are so these three last cables right here, here, and here are, again, they don't have a latch, so you just take the cable and shove it in. Be careful with all these cables, they are quite fragile. Now take your antenna cable and make sure it's aligned, and then you can press down on it, as well as take this last connection and make sure it's aligned and push it in place. Now you should have pretty much everything connected to the main motherboard, so we can reattach our power board and our circle pad. I did kind of lie, so we need to remove this cable right here to get the power cable underneath. So just get that in place and snap the power cable down. So just make sure it's aligned and then push down. And then we can take the power cable and also make sure it's running through its own channel. I'll show you in a second. There, I have that power cable running through its channel, so just make sure it's running all the way through there. And now you can take your microphone cable and put it back in place. Just like that. And to connect the circle pad, again, we just fold over the power board and slide the connection in, and then fold down on the connector. There. And now take your power cable and put it in place, fold down the latch. And then while putting this analog stick back in place, I like to kind of straighten out this ribbon cable. So just carefully pull on it, not too hard, but to straighten it out just a little bit so it's a bit easier to work on. And make sure your connection here is open, so the latch is open, and then you can take your cable, slide it in, fold down on the connection, and now your analog stick is connected. Now to get your analog stick into its place, make sure your stick has the notch facing upwards, so kind of turn it just like that, and then make sure it's right in the middle. So you can fold this over and push down on it. If it doesn't snap in place, just make sure everything's aligned again and try again. But I got it first try, and to test, I'll just flip it over and make sure it feels like normal. I won't be installing any screws just yet because I'm not 100% sure if all these connections are fine, so I recommend you keep all your screws out for now because you might need to take out your motherboard again to make sure all the connections are fine. So I'll just grab my bottom case and take these cables and connect them back up. So I'll just start with this cable and snap it down, as well as this one. And then I need to fold down on the housing. This connection is a bit more tricky, so you need to grab it with your finger and then push down on it. But when you're done, it should look like this, and then you can just take your back housing and push down on everything, and it should just go in place like that. Now I'll take my battery. I have a battery adapter so I can fit a smaller battery because my original battery is a bit bloated, so I replaced that with a new one, but I need this adapter. You'll just have your normal battery. So just slide that in like that and put this cover on top, and now fold your 3DS open and hold everything in place because we didn't install any screws. So just make sure everything's tight and in place, and you can power it on. And check it out. Top screen is working just fine. It is, for some reason, in Russian, so I still need to change the language of this 3DS because I bought it used, and was planning on fixing it, so that's why it's in Russian. But yeah, looks like everything is working, so I'm just going to test this completely, make sure all the buttons work, the sliders, volume, and 3D as well. But it does look like everything's working. Also, make sure your camera is working, but mine looks like it's working just fine. Okay, it looks like everything's working great, so I'll just power the 3DS back off. And now we need to reinstall all the screws. If you're running into any issues powering on your 3DS, you can kind of tell what the issue is. So if you power it on and the LED goes on for a quick second and then goes off right away with sometimes there is kind of a popping sound, don't worry, it's probably just a connection in the screen. So you can take a look and look very carefully. If the bottom screen flashes, that means it receives power and the top screen isn't connected. If the top screen flashes, that means the bottom screen isn't connected. Also, if your screens just stay black but the LED stays on all the time, you might need to check the camera cable for connection. If it's not connected all the way, it might not work. And also, if your bottom screen flashes, I said the top screen doesn't work, but also make sure the speaker ribbon cable is connected properly. So again, if your 3DS doesn't power on fully, or if anything's not working, just double check that all your ribbon cables are pushed in all the way, nothing is ripped or missing or out of place. And if you're still unsure, just write a comment below. I'll try to respond to everything and make sure your 3DS works fine again. Now to finish everything up, we'll just remove this bottom case again. So just kind of lift up on the top half a tiny bit, like that, and get your fingernail underneath, and you might need to hold your board down to remove this, because it does get stuck on the headphone jack. Now, again, remove all these cables. There should be 3, just like before. And now we can take all the last screws and reinstall them. So for the power board, we had these 4 very short screws. So just put these in place. Now we can take our 2 medium-sized motherboard screws and put them in right here and here. I'll grab my very long circle pad screws, this type, and screw these in. And now we have everything, all the screws put in place right here. So I'll fold the 3DS up just like that and take the 2 remaining screws from the top half and reinstall those. These are again this kind of medium-sized screw. And then take these 2 rubber pieces and put them over top the screws. Now I'll take my bottom half and again align these connections and push down. And then grab this last connection right here with my finger and align it and push down. Now I'll just make sure this top half looks just fine, and then I can take the bottom side and push it, snap it over that headphone jack. And to finish it off, I'll take my 7 housing screws, the longer sides, and put them through the back housing. Now I'll just reinstall these last 2 rubber pieces and grab my micro SD card reader, align the cable with the connection like that and snap it in place. Make sure it's pressed down firmly, and then you can slide in the top part first and then press down on the bottom. And we need to reinstall the last 3 tri-wing screws, so grab your tri-wing screwdriver and reinstall the screws. Now that you have those screws back in place, you can take your micro SD card and slide it back in place and reinstall your battery. Because I only have one lower housing piece, I'm going to replace it with these 2 white ones I have. Align these bottom parts first, and then push down, and then swap back to the Phillips screwdriver and screw these screws down, as well as replace the top cover. So again, align this on the bottom and snap it down in place. And everything's done. Looks perfect, so everything's back in place and the screen is working just fine. But the time was reset because we removed the battery, so just go to the settings and set the date and time correctly. So now that I've set the date and time and changed the language to English, everything's working just fine. I hope it worked for you too. Let me know in the comments down below, and as well as if you have any issues, just let me know and I'll try to respond. Yeah, see you later.